Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in all of our lives when we are faced with a choice, not between right and wrong, but between reaction and restraint. A moment when someone's words cut deep, when their actions shake your spirit, when everything inside of you is screaming to clap back, speak up, defend your name. But what if I told you that your power isn't in your response, it's in your silence? See, we live in a world where noise is currency, where the loudest one is often seen as the strongest. But tonight I want to flip that. I want to tell you that there is divine strength in staying still. There is unmatched clarity in quiet. And there is a holy kind of fire that burns inside the one who chooses silence, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've learned how to protect your peace. It means you've made peace with not always having the last word. It means you understand that sometimes God fights your battles best when your mouth is closed. So tonight we're going deep. We're talking about the power of silence. Why staying quiet after disrespect doesn't make you small. It makes you unstoppable. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. And that statement right there challenges everything we've been taught, everything we've been conditioned to believe about power, strength, and justice. See, the world will tell you that if you don't speak up immediately, you're weak. If you don't clap back with the same energy, you're soft. If you don't defend yourself right then and there, you're letting them win. But silence is a different kind of power. It's not loud, it's not showy, it's not out to prove anything. But baby, it is effective. When someone disrespects you, there's a fire that ignites in your chest. It's instinctual. That heartbeat quickens. The words rise to your lips like a flood. And yet there's a still small voice in your spirit that says, not now. That voice, that's wisdom. That's discernment. That's the Holy Spirit keeping you from stepping into a war that doesn't deserve your presence. Because not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult needs a rebuttal. Not every attacker deserves your response. Sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is say nothing. You've got to understand, your silence isn't a lack of strength, it's the revelation of it. It means you've evaluated the situation and realized, my peace is too expensive to waste on this. It means you've matured past the need for validation. You don't have to prove who you are to someone who already made up their mind about you. And that kind of self-control, that's not weakness, that's warfare. Spiritual warfare, emotional warfare. Because the moment you decide to stay quiet, you've chosen to protect your power instead of performing for people who don't even understand it. There are people who will try to provoke you just to get a reaction. They don't want peace. They don't want peace. They don't want resolution. They want a show. They want to see you come out of character. They want to drag you into their chaos and watch you spiral, just so they can say, see, I told you they weren't who they pretend to be. But when you hold your silence, when you keep your composure, you deny them the satisfaction of disrupting your spirit. See, you become unpredictable. You become untouchable, because there's nothing more frustrating to someone trying to tear you down than a person who refuses to come off their throne to respond to petty nonsense. Silence is a weapon. It disarms, it confuses, it shifts the atmosphere. While others are busy arguing, defending, shouting to be heard, you're sitting in peace, building, growing, elevating. Your silence says, I know who I am, and I don't need to explain it to you. It says, I know whose I am, and he'll speak for me when it matters most. You begin to see that silence isn't passive, it's powerful, because while they're reacting, you're reflecting. While they're ranting, you're rising. Think about it. Jesus didn't always respond to disrespect. He didn't always correct the false narratives. He didn't chase down every critic or clap back at every insult. Sometimes he stood silent, silent before his accusers, silent before Pilate, silent while being mocked. Not because he couldn't speak, but because he knew the moment he opened his mouth, everything would shift. And sometimes that shift isn't meant to happen yet. Sometimes your silence is saving someone. Sometimes your silence is saving you. We don't talk enough about how silence can be prophetic, how it creates space for God to speak. When you step back and stay silent, you give heaven room to move. You give divine timing the chance to align. You say, God, I trust you more than I trust my emotions. I trust your justice more than my judgment. I trust that if I keep my mouth shut, you'll open the right doors and shut the wrong ones. And I know it's hard. I know silence feels like swallowing pride. Like letting someone get away with something, like laying down when you really want to stand up. But understand, true power doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't scream for respect, it just is. When you master the art of silence, you master the art of staying in alignment with your purpose. Because what God has for you cannot be derailed by petty distractions. And every time you choose silence, you're not surrendering, you're stepping into strategy. A strategy that positions you for peace, for promotion, and for power that doesn't have to prove itself. Peace is the proof of power. Not presence, not popularity, not who claps for you the loudest. Real power isn't in who talks the most or who can dominate a room with their voice. It's not in how many followers you have or how quick you can shut someone down. No, true power is quiet. It's calm, steady. And the loudest evidence that you're walking in strength is the peace you carry when chaos comes knocking. There's something unshakable about a person who has peace. Not the kind of peace that's based on circumstances. Not the kind of peace that's only present when everything's going right. I'm talking about the kind of peace that sits with you in the fire. That peace that doesn't flinch when people start talking. That peace that keeps your heart anchored when everything around you is shifting. That kind of peace is power. Because it means you've learned to trust something deeper than your environment. You've learned to trust God. See, peace doesn't mean nothing is happening. Peace doesn't mean no one is coming for you. Peace means you know what's inside of you is stronger than what's coming against you. No, that's why it's proof. Because when people see you not reacting, not breaking, not falling apart when you have every reason to, they don't see weakness. They see a kind of strength that doesn't make sense. And that kind of strength doesn't come from outside. It's birthed from within. The world wants to measure power by how much noise you make, how quick you can retaliate, how easily you can dominate a conversation. But heaven sees things differently. Heaven measures power by what doesn't shake you. By how much peace you can carry when your name is being dragged, when the door is closed, when the answer is no. It's in those moments, those secret, painful, silent moments that your true power is revealed. Not because you shouted, not because you posted, but because you stood still and stayed calm. People confuse peace with passivity. They think if you're not reacting, you're weak. But real peace requires discipline. It takes strength to stay silent. It takes restraint to hold your tongue. It takes faith to believe that you don't need to fight every battle, that some things are better handled by God. And when you can do that, when you can trust enough to rest, that's power, because the world is built to keep you anxious, reactive, always in defense mode. So when you choose peace, you're breaking the cycle. You're standing in rebellion against a system that wants to steal your joy and hijack your purpose. And let's be honest, anyone can act powerful when things are going well. When the money's flowing, when the doors are opening, when the relationships are thriving. But peace isn't proven in the high moments, it's proven in the pressure. It's proven when the lie spreads, when the opportunity slips through your fingers, when the disappointment hits deeper than you expected. That's where peace becomes a testimony. That's where power shows up, not with a bang, but with the whisper that says, I'm still here, I'm still whole, I'm still standing. It's not that things don't hurt. It's not that you don't want to scream or fight back or let them know exactly what they did. It's that you've matured enough to know that peace is worth more than being right. Peace is worth more than proving a point. Peace is worth more than being understood by people who don't even have the capacity to see your truth. You've stopped chasing closure and started chasing peace. You stopped arguing for your value and started protecting your energy. That's power. That's the control. That's the kind of growth that can't be faked. You know you're walking in power when your first instinct is no longer to react, but to pause. When your spirit checks you before your mouth can speak. When you ask God, is this mine to fight? Instead of jumping into every fire that's lit around you, that's how you know you've stepped into something deeper. Because peace isn't just a feeling, it's a weapon, a shield. A signal to everything around you that you are no longer moved by the noise. You're anchored by the truth. And that truth doesn't come from people. It doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from applause. It comes from the God who sees everything, knows everything, and still says, be still and know that I am God. When you live in that space, peace becomes your posture. And that posture, that's what turns storms into silence and opposition into opportunity. Every response doesn't deserve your energy. Let that settle deep in your spirit, because some of us have been giving too much of ourselves to things, to people, to conversations that don't deserve access to our power. See, your energy is sacred. Your focus is fuel. And the more you spend it on the things that don't matter, the less you have for the things that do. Every time you respond to nonsense, every time you engage with disrespect, every time you try to prove yourself to someone who's already committed to misunderstanding you, you're wasting energy that could have been building your future. There's a difference between reacting and responding, and a difference between responding and reserving. Maturity is learning that just because something was said doesn't mean it deserves an answer. Just because someone crossed the line doesn't mean you have to meet them on that level. Some things are meant to be ignored, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You've got too much to lose to keep entertaining things that don't feed your destiny. People will bait you with disrespect. They'll throw shade to pull you out of character. They want to see you react because they know if you respond, they control the tone. But when you refuse to give your energy to their dysfunction, you break their grip. You're not obligated to explain, defend, or validate your position to anybody who hasn't earned the right to sit at your table. Just because they're loud doesn't mean they matter. Just because they're in your face doesn't mean they belong in your space. The moment you start being selective with your energy, you shift the power dynamics in your life. You stop being led by emotion and start being led by intention. You begin to ask, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my time? Is this worth me stepping out of alignment with who I'm becoming? Because every response costs something. It costs time, it costs focus, it costs mental clarity. And some of us are emotionally bankrupt because we've been spending energy on situations that were never supposed to have our attention in the first place. You are not everybody's audience. You are not required to show up to every argument you're invited to. Let them talk. Let them talk. Let them twist it. Let them misunderstand. You don't owe everybody access to your clarity. Some things are better left unanswered, unbothered, and unaddressed. Silence isn't weakness. It's stewardship. Choosing to protect your power and conserve your energy for what actually matters. Think about how many doors you could have walked through if you hadn't spent so much time trying to prove your worth to people who were never meant to see it. Think about how much further along you'd be if you didn't stop every time someone tried to provoke you. There's a cost to constantly responding, and that cost is your momentum. Every time you let them distract you, they delay you. Every time you let them get under your skin, they gain control over your day. Not every battle is a worthy one. Not every confrontation is a divine assignment. You've got to get comfortable walking away from what's beneath you. And I don't mean that in arrogance, I mean it in alignment. You are not the same person you used to be. You don't have to fight the same way you used to fight. You don't have to defend yourself in every room, on every comment, every conversation. The fruit of your life will speak for you. The peace in your life will testify louder than your words ever could. We spend so much energy reacting to things we should have just released. We carry burdens we were supposed to drop. We pick up offenses that don't belong to us. And every time we do, we slow down our own progress. The enemy doesn't always show up in dramatic ways. Sometimes he shows up in petty arguments, in unnecessary debates and distractions disguised as that they need to hear me. But they don't. They need to watch you rise. They need to see you succeed. They need to witness what it looks like when you choose growth over gossip, purpose over pride, and destiny over drama. When you really know who you are, when you really know what you carry, you don't feel the need to announce it everywhere you go. You walk in it. You live in it. You embody it. You embody it. And that embodiment doesn't require explanation. It requires conservation. You start treating your energy like the valuable currency it is. You stop making change for every passerby and start investing in the places that multiply, not drain. God will vindicate what you stay silent about. That's not just a comforting idea. It's a spiritual law. It's the quiet strength that rises up when you've been wronged, misjudged, lied on, overlooked, and you choose not to retaliate, not because you couldn't, but because you trust the one who sees all and knows all. There is a kind of divine justice that doesn't need your voice to activate it. It just needs your trust. And that trust is proven in silence, in the restraint, in the decision to let God fight the battles that were never yours to begin with. We've been taught to speak up, to defend ourselves, to clear the air, to make sure our side is heard. And there's a time for that, but there's also a sacred time to be still. Because when God steps in, his vindication doesn't just restore your name. It exposes every hidden agenda, every lie, every weapon formed against you. And the beauty of his vindication is that it doesn't require your participation. It doesn't need you to clap back, to explain, to correct the record. It just needs you to believe that he's still God in the courtroom, in the conflict, in the chaos. There is a peace that comes when you know heaven is handling it, when you release the weight of proving yourself, when you stop rehearsing what you'd say if you had the chance. That mental warfare, that spiritual exhaustion from trying to justify your heart to people who don't even have the capacity to hold it, that fades when you realize God has already seen it all. And not only has he seen it, he's keeping record, not for revenge, but for redemption. Because he will make it right in a way that humbles your enemies and elevates you without you having to lift a single finger. The hardest thing to do sometimes is nothing, especially when the pain is fresh, when the betrayal is deep, when the disrespect is loud. Everything in your flesh wants to speak, to set the record straight, to defend your name. But sometimes silence is the loudest declaration of faith you can make. It says, I trust you, God. I trust you more than I trust my own words. I trust that you see me and you will make this work for my good, even when I don't see how. That kind of trust shifts the atmosphere. It invites the supernatural. It puts the situation in God's hands and says, I'm stepping back so you can step in. Vindication from God doesn't just restore your reputation. It reveals your character. It shows that you were willing to choose obedience over optics, that you valued integrity over image, and that even in the fire, even in the pressure, you chose to honor God with your silence. That silence becomes a shield. It covers you while God works behind the scenes, because while people are talking, scheming, twisting, God is preparing a table. He's orchestrating timing. He's building a platform for your testimony. And when he vindicates you, he doesn't just restore, he multiplies. He elevates. He makes it undeniable that his hand was on you the whole time. And make no mistake, vindication doesn't always come in the form of public apology or people admitting they were wrong. Sometimes it comes in peace. Sometimes it comes in the way doors open for you that they tried to close. Sometimes it comes in the joy they tried to strip from you, rising up stronger than ever. Vindication is not always loud. Sometimes it's just the glow you walk in after surviving what was sent to destroy you. You can't afford to keep losing your voice over every attack. You can't keep allowing situations to pull you out of alignment just because you want to be understood. Not everyone is meant to understand your calling. Not everyone has the eyes to see what God is doing in your life. That's why your silence is sacred, because it makes space for God to be God. It says, I refuse to get in your way. I refuse to make this about me. I'm going to keep walking, keep building, keep becoming while you handle the rest. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes from knowing you're covered, from knowing the battle belongs to the Lord, from knowing that vindication is not about proving others wrong. It's about proving God right. It's about allowing him to do what only he can do. Bring justice, bring healing, bring clarity in a way that no conversation ever could. And when he does it, it's complete. It's undeniable. It's holy. And the silence that once felt like injustice turns into the evidence that your character never needed a defense in the first place. When you decide not to react, when you let your silence carry the weight of your confidence, you begin to separate yourself from the noise. You begin to rise above the low places where drama tries to dwell. And in that space, you become someone whose character doesn't shout. It shines. Sometimes your silence is the closure. We live in a world that tells us closure comes from conversations, explanations, long-winded goodbyes, or sitting down with the person who hurt us and hoping they'll suddenly understand. But the truth is, some people will never own what they did. Some people will never be sorry the way you need them to be. And if you keep waiting for them to hand you the closure your soul is starving for, you'll stay stuck in a space God already called you out of. Silence becomes your exit, your healing, your permission to move on without needing the apology they'll never give. Closure isn't always about understanding what happened. Sometimes it's about accepting that it happened and deciding that it no longer deserves access to your energy. Your silence is a boundary. It's the way you say, I don't have to go back and forth to validate my peace. When you go silent, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're announcing your healing. You're saying, I've cried my tears, I've prayed my prayers, and now I'm done explaining myself to people who mishandle my heart. We keep looking for endings in people who were only meant to be chapters. We want a final conversation that ties it all up, makes it make sense, and gives us that satisfying feeling of being heard. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you have to give yourself the closure. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your head high and your lips closed. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because what you would say won't change what already is. There's healing in choosing silence when what you want is justice. When what you want is recognition. When what you want is the satisfaction of knowing they finally see your side. But sometimes silence is the scar that says, I healed without you. I found peace without you. I got up from the floor you left me on, and I didn't need you to see it to believe it. That's a different kind of power. That's not the power that comes from being seen. That's the power that comes from being settled. And only silence can deliver that kind of settling. People often think silence means defeat, that if you're not saying anything, you must be weak. But silence is often the sound of strength. It's the voice of someone who's been through the fire and came out with a new language. Not the language of bitterness, not the language of rage, but the language of peace, of release, of surrender. Silence doesn't say you're okay with what happened. It says you're no longer letting it control what happens next. There are wounds that don't close because we keep reopening them with words. We keep revisiting the story, replaying the moment, rewriting the narrative so it ends in a way that makes us feel powerful. But true closure doesn't come from rewriting the ending. It comes from deciding you don't need one. It comes from choosing your future over your need for understanding. It comes from letting go without the extra dialogue, without the dramatic exit, without the moment of, I hope you finally see what you did. Your silence says, I see it, I've seen enough, and that's all the closure I need. We forget sometimes that closure is internal. It's not a door someone else closes for you. It's one you learn to close yourself. And when you choose silence, you're not just walking away, you're sealing the room. You're closing the door. You're locking it from the inside and throwing away the key because you know there's nothing back there worth revisiting. Silence is how you make peace with what didn't make sense. How you claim victory over what tried to make you bitter. How you start again without needing someone else's permission. The most powerful healing often happens in silence. It's in the quiet moments where God whispers truth back into the places people tried to tear down. It's in the stillness that you hear him say, you didn't deserve that, but you're still chosen. You were mishandled, but you're still mine. Silence gives room for the divine to speak where noise once drowned out clarity. It makes space for growth, for wisdom, for that kind of wholeness that doesn't need validation to be real. When you go silent, you reclaim your narrative. You choose not to let broken people tell your story. You decide that your healing is no longer contingent on their awareness. You find your peace, not in what was said, but in what no longer needs to be said. In that kind of closure, that's where freedom begins.